show is called Striking a Balance. Mainly what we are looking into is we are unpacking mental health issues. We find that the cases of suicide, they are at an increase, divorce at an increase, depression at an increase. As human beings, we are not safe. So we have come to a point whereby we get to talk about this thing, to open a forum whereby we discuss these things, because we seldom as humans talk about this, especially as Africans. We only talk about our issues when we go to the saloon or to the barber shop. But however, this is your show whereby we get to unpack and discuss all these issues. I have Metha Nyamande, who's a psychotherapist, and I have Valerie Sharara, who's a psychologist, and I have Dr. Dombiro, who is a medical doctor. So in all this, I am your layman. I represent you. As you are sitting at home watching, I represent you. So we have many questions to ask, and there are many scenarios that come forth in our lives. So today in this segment, we'll watch a clip whereby there is a couple who are somehow, they are married, but they are failing to have kids. You know, you can be in that situation also. But we are saying, watch this episode, and I do believe your life will be better going forth.
Nanchikutaga ku bedroom ndenda kumirira wona zvandikureva
chamari maskati mano wanditsvaga mu bedroom
but inga takaura kuti chamboza vakakupedzisira ndaita kuti
no we've been trying for 3 years and I've been working hard trying nasi day 14 ndiri on I definitely ndobata usingabati singabati sandibati because ndizvo ndatizira bedroom zvozvo zvandibata kunge ndiri remote nini
ndachita kuti sorry alright saka ukuti nditoita sei
aiwa chama you should try something wakamumbuya wakamboti kumbotaka kuvanhu tikaenda kuvanhu tikataya aiwa ine ndindufa ka because vanhu vekumba kwenyu vakundisa pressure ndinga ndikuchera mutoti mutombo risina chini
imhosva yangu ere
imhosva yekuti chi
mhosva tina mwana saka imhosva yangu
no yeah it's okay because even kuti ini ndambotya ndikaona kuti ndozvara iwa uzvarika it's an issue of another day. I see nyaya tutaura nazo panyaya ndiri kutaura kuti nini I'm sick and tired of this. Kana usinganipi mwana wana do undisiye zve inini I need a family. I cannot stay with someone, a girlfriend.
Mira.
Don't even touch me because you know what Chapio, I'm sick and tired of this.
So what did she
I don't want to say this, but the thing is, I've tried consenting. I want to I'm a man, but I don't know what happened. Because if you can't give me kids, I don't think I should keep you. So now we end up.
For someone to be pregnant. Whereas if the woman wants to go out and is pregnant, it's different because then the woman needs to show the things that show that she's becoming pregnant. So what then we are talking about is societies. Why do we then allow the men to go and test? The woman is not going out to test. And yet you may find that maybe the men's sperm count is low. And so I mean there are many issues around.
But like we said earlier on, the biology plays a part. You might be fertile, she might be fertile, but together there are other things that are going on that are affecting your fertility. Then if she was to go out there and be happy with somebody else, she can conceive. And if you do the same things, you can conceive as well. But like between the two of you, there is so much stress, tension, and anxieties that is actually getting in the way of you two getting
conceiving. Like that whole part of day 14. I was just thinking to myself, if they wait for day 14 every month, and every other day of the month nothing is happening because they are so
Mhm.
frustrated with each other.
Mm.
Maybe I do understand that there is a timing for all this, but maybe their calculations are wrong or they're misguided, and what they think is the right period is actually not the right period because
Exactly.
they never really sought
Exactly.
medical advice on the way to calculate these things. There is a right time and a wrong time to conceive. So maybe they are wrong, and then they're waiting for day 14 from January to December. Nothing is happening. Simply because you're misguided,
Yeah.
not because you're not fit or obviously.
Exactly. Exactly.
And
Just
yet,
that part.
yet the intimacy is not about the.
Yes, about
the-
conceiving, about the day.
It's about what is the how much love.
Yes.
How much,
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
how much we create that kind of atmosphere which allows.
Children are only of oneness. It's
So,
not
so
really-
this takes us back to right at the beginning of what is marriage about. Yeah, when two people come together and say, "Well, let's get married. I love you and you love me, right? Let's make this a union. We're happy together." And then when you then get married and you're in that space, then naturally you have children. These are some of the things that happen. But if you make it an expectation that we're getting married because my parents want children, my father wants a boy, so let's rush and do that, we are creating unnecessary pressures on the couple. As the parents of the couple, we need to also understand that what we've grown up with, and this is where I was saying culture is part of the problem here. That what our parents grew up with, grew up being taught, grew up experiencing, is what they want for us. Even though when they reflect back on it, they feel depressed. They say, "Well, my parents used to neglect me." But this is exactly what they then do with their own children.
On that note, when we talk about the instance of looking at marriage, we believe that marriage is some kind of it's a result of love. Two people, they like each other, then they feel like the bond is too much. They can't, they can't stand the separation element whereby you go home and others go their way. So these two, they end up creating that union. Then they are brought forth before families. Then they are union. They have to go start a family.
Right.
But the problem is in the element when we say family, because when we say family, it's more like you are given a farm. Then they say, okay, go and do your thing there. When you're given a farm, you're expected to bring forth the results. It's either it's maize or it's cattle rearing or whatever. But you are supposed to bring forth the results. So culturally, the society says when you get married. That's why when you get married, on that very day of getting married, first thing that happens is honeymoon.
Right.
After honeymoon, they are saying now you are getting busy.
Are you pregnant?
So after honeymoon, you meet your family member. They're like, "Hey, how far?" The next question every gathering that we go to is, "How far?" We are expecting to see babies running. Because recently I attended a certain wedding, and the auntie was giving a speech. She was like, "You know what? I auntie so and so, I love babies." So automatically you are telling the couple, "Get busy. I want kids." So then the frustration comes when you can't have kids.
Yeah. So this is where I was saying, when we go back to the whole idea of marriage, I always want to go back to the beginning. We're looking at, culturally at the moment, we've got a boy who is dependent on his parents. Yeah. We've got a girl who's dependent on her parents. Because before marriage, the girl's still staying at her parents, so she's a dependent. Yeah? So we've got two dependent individuals coming together who have not experienced what it is like to be independent. Can you see how that creates problems in itself? So we've got two people who are used to mom and dad do things for me. They provide for me. They protect me. They do these things for me. Now, when I go into this marriage, I don't know what being independent looks like. So the dependency is transferred from my parents to my partner. So we continuously maintaining this element of dependency rather than looking at a situation where these children need to learn to be independent. When you have two independent people coming together, they are then able to create an interdependency where I can bring something home, you can bring something home, we put these things that we're bringing home together. But when we look back at the culture, it's culture back then, mother stayed at home for the kids and father went to work to provide. That is a dependent, as a woman, you become dependent in this situation where the husband is kind of co-dependent on you, with each other. So that is a problem in itself. So unless we start to look at the culture to say, how can we create the independence that these children need to be able to go into a marriage with an understanding of, I am an independent person, I am making an independent decision to be with this person.
On that note, Meta, somehow better to define a way, because you find that nowadays everyone wants to be independent in the sense that they just want to have something of their own, they are working, they have their own apartment. Then the issue is, I think the main issue is on the sense that even if you are independent, you are working. Our form of independence is the fact that you are having your own income, you have your own apartment. But when it comes to love, we go back to be bound by everything that society says we should do. So we can be independent, we can be free in whatever decisions that we make, but when we get married, then we go back to that shadow of society. Because when we get married, that's when you say, aunties, whatsoever, they come and say, you are supposed to do this. They read you that whole chapter of, if you are a married woman, you should do this. If you are a man, you should do this. And patriarchy kicks in. The man is given much powers. You are the voice. You run the house.
And this is where I'm talking about independence. Now, the reason why I'm talking about independence in that way is such that I think at the last discussion that we had at some point that we're saying, even if I am in my mother and my father's house today, yeah, and my father says, go and do this, even though I know it's wrong, I have to go and do it because he's my father, yeah. But we have to start looking at a point where we, as adults, as old as we are, yeah, if our fathers were sitting there and saying, you stop saying that, start saying this, we can't do that. We can't live in a society where we do not grow and develop into adulthood, allowing another adult to tell us what to do and how to do it. This is the element of independence I'm talking about. So even if you're staying in your father's house, the independence I'm referring to is being able to say, I'm 32 now, Dad, I'm going to work. When I come back from work, this is what I would want for us to do. Not Dad saying, you do this, you come home at 6 o'clock. You don't do that. We need to start talking adult to adult here. There is, what's it called? Transaction analysis, where we look at the element of parent, adult, child. We stay in the space where we talk parent, child all the time. Even if I'm 40, we need to come into a space where we start to talk as adults. Yeah? We need to start to exchange ideas, to discuss different opinions. Because for as long as I wait for Dad to tell me what to do, I remain in a situation of dependency. This is where I'm talking about dependency and independence. In that regard. Not just about having my own apartment. Having an own apartment might give you a sense of independence, but for as long as your father comes into the picture, you become dependent again. But what I'm talking about is maturing to a point of, you're an adult, Dad, I'm an adult, let's have this conversation as adults. Let's agree to disagree. Let's be constructive in what we are trying to do. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, just to add on to your ideas and going back to the clipping discussion now, it really does boil down to understanding as an individual the motivation for being with someone in the very first place. Okay, why am I here? Why is she my wife? Why is he my husband? Parents. Or did I do it for myself?
Yeah.
So I think, as you were saying, like giving the example of what happened at a wedding, we are quick to be driven to consider what the people around us are expecting of us when we get married, and forget what we want out of it. So I think, as married people, let's take a moment to understand why we are here and to understand your significant other, right? And then from there, I think it's much easier now to achieve that independence that you're talking about. Because I was thinking of that guy going out there as a man to prove that indeed you've got functional seed. Is it really about you wanting a child? Do you really want a child? How many of us have ever really taken time to think about that? I've seen so many people that have children and turn out to be horrible parents. And I think if you actually sit down with them at some point, they'll admit that, no, I never really wanted kids. But you were driven by society, by people around you to prove that you're a man. And who said if you can't father a child, you're not a man? So it's all things like that that we've got to sit down and question.
Back to culture.
That are linked back to our culture and the society in which we are raised. And those are the things that can actually be the roots of the problems in our marriage, as we've seen in there.
On that note, I would like to pose a question to Doctor. I do believe in your line of work. People come forth. How do people really come forth to inquire or try to figure out of their when it comes to their fertility?
Okay. Thank you very much for that question. So I also want to maybe just add a different dimension to what my colleagues are talking about. As much as you come together in a marriage and you want to be the two of you, our culture is evolving and the evolution is slow. So things may have gotten faster, but we still have things that we carry from before. So, for example, what the community, what the society is going to think about us, if we are married and we don't have children. So questions will be raised. So when are we getting the next child? Questions will be, the thinking has always been, if you can't have children, then it has to be the woman, it's not the man. The man is got the seed, and while this physical evidence, the seed is there. But it's the woman who is not receiving, who is not accepting. So we do get people coming and saying, okay, they really come to us and say, I'm worried, I'm stressed because I'm not having children. They'll come with things like, I'm not sleeping, or I'm not eating. Or maybe at some point the man or the woman is tried to commit suicide. Then you, as one is taking history, you go back and say, okay, but what is it? So the stories that we hear, oh, he's drinking too much. That's the next thing that we hear. Then the next thing that we hear is, oh, okay, he's drinking too much. And apparently, they've been married for 10 years and there's no child. Then the next thing is, okay, but we went to see a doctor and the doctor said the tubes are blocked. Going back to it, I'll say one, for example, why is she not sleeping? Why did she try to commit suicide? Because the community, society is asking her every day, where's the child? That's the child. What is the child? So she wants to, whether we like it or not, people around us quite often determine how we react and how we do things. So she's responding, she's pushing I need a child. This guy is frustrated, he's drinking. And then what happened next? As we discussed earlier on, he goes out and gets intimate with someone else, gets an STI. Then what happens? He brings the STI home. And the next thing is the woman's tubes are blocked. And now, because the tubes are blocked, he is not blocked. Because he can still go and have a child. But now she's blocked. So the analysis, the synthesis is, so she's not fertile. She is infertile. But people don't look at how the dynamics, how things started off. It started off with this aunt who says, I want a child the next year. Or a Nango who says, if there's no children, then this marriage cannot stay. And then he tries to prove that he actually can have children. And unfortunately, the process proved that she can't have children because now the tubes are blocked. So I think the whole way we manage the marriage and the relationship should start early, very early on, when people come together. When you come together, one of the things that I hear is when I interview the men who come to the woman who has tried to commit suicide because she can't conceive, the men say, no, I'm not concerned. We can be together forever with no children. But the question that I tend to pose is, how truthful is this guy being? Saying, I can be with you for the rest of your life with no children, when this man is actually having 2 or 3 children out there. And then this woman lives with the delusion that, in fact, he is not married, so we can. But again, when questions are asked out there, I don't have the answers. Where is, why, I don't have the answers to that. And so sometimes we actually get women who have what we call pseudosciences. So they start to believe that they are pregnant. And they act in every respect like a pregnant woman. And they actually end up with a bulging tummy, just like someone who's pregnant. They then go to hospital, and of course nothing is found. Or they then go to hospitals, there's still children. Just to prove that in fact I was pregnant and I have children. So this is a very complicated area, and it's really not one solution. And I think as individuals, as the married couple, we need to be proactive, and as the community, we need to apply less pressure on the couple, because by the pressure we worsening things, because friction between the couple increases, even intimacy is not there. And how do you expect them to be pregnant?
I wanted to come back to drive a point to Valerie, saying that, let's put this scenario with the clip in that we have been watching. So this is a couple.
Yeah.
The guy is complaining that whenever I have an off day, you want us to be intimate. So he's literally running away from intimacy. So which means there's no romance to it. It's more like an obligation. I have to sleep with you, but there is nothing that is, no emotions into it. So is it an issue? Because I'm looking at it from a point whereby we are on lockdown. You have your wife all day long, and you can't bear to be in the same room with her. So the issues of mental health kick in, meaning to say, much of the population, people who are married and so forth, is something that is scary out there. So I'm referring to you, Valerie, as a psychologist, saying that in the such scenario, what is your likely view when you're looking into all this, the outplay of all this?
Okay. When you start now regarding intimacy as it's a goal-directed behavior, you're being intimate to achieve a certain result, that being conceiving a child. I think it kind of deviates from the whole point of intimacy, okay, and the whole objective of intimacy. And I actually understand the guy, because if now he's being hunted every second for the sake of conceiving a child, or now he's hunting his wife because he wants to conceive, what's the joy in that? Intimacy must be something that couples must enjoy mutually, you know, and no specific time, no purpose, no reason, simply because you want to do that, right? And if you're not deriving any joy out of it anymore, then I think it borders on abuse in a way, you know, because there's not going to be any enjoyment in it, right? And again, when you keep doing it and you're still failing to achieve what you're trying to achieve, it only leads to frustration. And then we're just going to be eyesores for each other every other day. So I think it kind of compounds all the other pressures that people might be dealing with already. Because remember, we're dealing with this whole problem of failing to conceive. But there can be other issues in our marriage or in our lives. Look at it now, we're in a lockdown. Everybody is stressed, everybody is anxious. You know, we're all dealing with stresses regarding worrying about our health, about our safety, worrying about our jobs, you know, worrying about our financial situations. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. So you've got to deal with all that. And then you've got this on top of that. I think that's why we have an increased number of domestic violence cases right now in this lockdown. Because everything is just so compounded, and it's just going to get to a point where people are going to explode and just hurt each other. So,
when we're talking about intimacy as well, we've got to be mindful that men and women consider intimacy very differently. For men, it's quite easy. In a few minutes or in a few seconds, you could think, oh, well, I like that girl, I want to have sex with her, and you could have an erection in a very short space of time. But for women, sometimes it's a prolonged process, getting into the idea of the romance of it. You could start planting the seed of, well, let's have sex tonight, in the morning or the day before. You know, as you leave for work, you throw in a few nuances of saying, oh, well, you know, it would be nice to do something funny tonight, you know. And all day she starts to think about it, she starts to fantasize about it. By the time you come back, she's ready for that intimate space that you've been talking about, you've been teasing each other about all day, texting each other about ideas of what you've done, what you could do, all those kind of things. So when you talk about intimacy, it's about how you're connecting to each other. It's not as easy to just say, okay, well, I'm not ready. I've got a research paper to finish. My thought process is on this paper. I need to finish that right now. You know, or you know, I've got a headache. All these other excuses that then start to come in because you've not been communicating in an intimate way. So all those issues come into play. Bedroom, it just doesn't really communicate a connection between two people. It actually highlights that there is no connection between these two people. When did this waiting for you idea come into play? Did you communicate that to me earlier? Did I know that this was going to happen today? Maybe I'd forgotten about day 14 or whatever it is day that we agreed is going to happen. But it's about how do we communicate these issues. And what you said, Stock, earlier on about marriage and relationships, we are in a situation where these things are not taught. There is no manual about life, marriage, and relationships. But when you look at, as I was talking about earlier on, about dependency, independence, interdependence, when you bring those things together, the transaction analysis, parent-adult child, all those things help us to understand what needs to happen. People need to communicate. People need to learn to understand that for these things to happen, this is not about my mother or my father or my culture or my society. This is about me. Yes, if I am happy, I'm appeasing my culture. I'm appeasing my parents. But if I'm not happy, and I'm doing what I think should make my parents happy, how do I know if they're happy? When I'm not happy, Sometimes when we try to put a face to things, we try to put a smile that isn't really coming from within. People around you can see that. Even though you might think, oh, I'm smiling, there is that non-verbal that goes along with that smile. There is all the body language that you emit that we can see. That, yeah, she's smiling, but there's something not right with that smile. So it's about the individual being happy to do what it is that is expected of them to do. Unless we start to look at it that way, we are going to cause the rest of the society misery by thinking we are making them happy. You're going to cause your parents a lot of misery thinking you're making them happy because they can see you're not happy. If you're my daughter, I can see you're happy. I know when you're happy and when you're not happy. Whether you're with a guy or not, I know when you're happy. So you then going to be with a person you don't really like to try and make me happy. How do you think that's going to make me feel?
Oh, on that note, looking at culture, as you said before, it happens that if I can't have kids, then one or the other, if I have a young brother or an elder brother, the elders can sit down, have a caucus, then like, how about if we go and intervene and help your brother? You see, he's failing to have a family. Even if my wife is not for the idea, just because it's culture, they'll say take one for the team. She will have to sleep with someone that she doesn't have feelings for, and so it's more like a job.
Yeah.
Then they have kids. I will feel like I have kids. But when that secret comes out, then that's another hello of a war. You slept with my wife, so these are not my kids. So how do we balance all that?
I think you're, as an individual, the way you react to something like that, or the way that you view something like that or perceive it, now it depends on what the whole marriage thing means to you as an individual. This is why I keep saying that, why did I get married? It's important to ask yourself that, because you've got to think in the context of I sometimes. To be a little selfish and remove yourself from everybody else around you, right? And then understand your own expectations out of these whole institutions and what you want out of it, right? And to think in the context of maybe we, to the point of including you and your spouse and nobody else. And to put a circle around the two of you, and then maybe at times think of the things that benefit the two of you, and make your marriage a healthier one. We're right now trying to promote, mental health in this pandemic and beyond, right? So in that context, we've got to keep rethinking. We've got culture and society, and we agree we cannot remove ourselves from that. Like Doc said, that will always be a part of who we are. But in the same manner, we've got to take a moment and identify certain traits and habits and whatever that's taught to us in the context of culture that actually has a negative impact on our well-being, on our mental health. Okay, I'm looking at what you're saying about your brother helping you to father children in your marriage. At that particular moment, I believe for some people it's totally okay, because your fundamental concern is to have a child, but you don't look beyond and look at the other problems that can arise from that situation. I think I remember reading a funny story in which the other brother now that came into health, okay, now developed a relationship with the brother's wife, and they could not separate the two. That's a complication that people don't think about when they start to suggest things like that. But this is a cultural practice that's been going on for ages, and we might regard that as totally acceptable. But are you really looking at what could go wrong? And just look at generally, is it really a good idea, So I will keep coming back to saying that you've got to understand what you're expecting of your own marriage. And to understand that when you did get married, we start off just the two of us. Sometimes in a very small apartment or in a one room, no children, nothing. It's just the two of us. And we're perfectly okay. So I think at that particular time is when you've got to understand that, look, things might remain like this. And if they remain like this, are we going to be okay? And I think for everybody, the answer should be yes. Because, as he said, you started off, you found your girl, and it's really about wanting to be together, as you said again. Just thinking, look, I just can't be without her. We've got to be together. You wanted her, okay, and the kids are a byproduct, are a bonus. We've got to understand that. Otherwise, this will keep coming back to us. In the clip, the guy was saying now that someone suggests that you consult, or Kuchivan, you know, and Doc said some couples come to him and they're seeking advice. And again, they'll never say it out straight that, look, the problem is you're failing to conceive. Okay, but how many of married couples failing to conceive actually consult doctors? They consult Hukuan, and yes, we do encourage taking advantage of the support systems in our society. They do work, you know, but again, there are times when they're not very supportive, or when they don't really teach us things that will help us. Okay, I come to my uncle, I come to my parents, or whatever, and some of these people will be the ones to tell you, what's your problem? You know, and they think it's a solution. Okay, so you as a guy or as a man being told that in the name of advice, you've got to be able to weigh for yourself and see if that's a good decision or if it's a good way to solve your problem.
And I think that highlights the whole element of self-esteem and confidence in each other. Because when you get to a point where, if I go back to the question that you posed, having to get my brother to implement my wife, whoever is conniving to do that could be my parents. They're not doing that for me, they're doing that for themselves. They're trying to make it look good to the society, but they're not looking to see how that affects me. Now when I find that out, am I going to trust them as people who are in my corner as my confidence? Maybe not. So this raises a whole can of worms here that we need to discuss and get to clarify, to say, what does that actually mean? As a cultural practice, what were we trying to do back then? Is it appropriate to do it now? As we said earlier on, culture shifts. Taifeka Nembe a few years ago, a few decades ago. But now, can we still do that because it was our culture? No, we can't. We've shifted to clothes right now. It's appropriate to wear clothes. Why have we done that? Is because we have evolved. As you said, culture evolves. Now, our values also need to evolve. And that's a very fundamental aspect of what culture and beliefs is about.
Okay, thank you very much on that note. Oh,
Yeah.
you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just want to, maybe as a way to move forward, one of the things that I agree with everything that we've said entirely. But when it comes to a point where, for example, in a marriage, it's a couple, and things change, and for one reason or another, it becomes important to have a child in the house. As we said, there are physiological reasons why people may not have children. There are psychological issues that may cause people not to have children. I just think that the couple should come back and really have a talk, a discussion. That okay, when we got married, we said you and me, and we were enough. Either the man or the woman says no, but you can see that position is not holding anymore. Like what issues I need to have a child, whether it's the woman or the man saying that. And they should be able to come to a point where they will say, okay, fine. Now that things have changed to this point and we are not able to have children, let's go and get it. And
I think that highlights a very important point in terms of the health as well.
We see a gyno, we see a psychologist, we see a
Together.
psychiatrist together, and then this thing is addressed. Instead of them addressing in the car and say, come to the room. We know that the biology of conception is complicated. I mean, you need millions and millions of the seed from the man, and yet the woman will be able to produce one egg every month. And this is complicated. So we need to solve. I would even advise that you go tested, get tested, and we know where the problems are. If their problems can be solved, then let them be solved. We've gone further, and we are now in a position to have in vitro fertilization, for example. If, for one reason or another, she cannot conceive inside, let's have in vitro and we have our baby together. I mean, I've seen individuals that have got children that they've had from in vitro fertilization, and they're happy. And so the marriage is saved, rather than to keep the man says, oh no, I'll be with you forever, I don't mind. What the woman saying, okay, I've tried my best and we can be together. When people actually are not being truthful to each other, so they should sit down and talk about these things. Things have changed. My priorities have changed, and I need to have children, or I need to have children with you. I've heard these stories where the woman then comes back and say, but for the last 10 years, you said you didn't care about children, but you went out and gave children all the time. These things should be talked, and people should be honest about the way they feel. The way they felt when they got married and the way they are feeling now. They should be able to sit down and talk about it and deal with it in a constructive way.
And I think that's a very crucial point, that, you know, sometimes it's okay to change your mind about whatever it is that you wanted when you got into marriage. But if this is not based on what you want, you then feel trapped in a situation where you can't say no because the society is dictating for you. So this comes back to the individual, the couple, what they want, what makes them happy. Then that happiness is what then overflows to out there to the society. But if you're not happy and you're trying to make the society happy, you're creating a bigger problem for the society, I think. And this is where the idea of the suicide comes into play. The idea of domestic violence comes into play. Because we are not happy. We're trying to make you happy. We're trying to make everybody else happy. But we're not happy. How does that actually work? Yeah? So there are huge and complex issues here that we can speak the whole week. We can sit here and speak for the whole week. But I think it's very important that we break some of these things down and get to a point where we can touch each one in more depth. Whether we go back to the childhood upbringing, the family dynamics, gender, expectations and roles, all those things play a part in this situation. And the whole idea of who is more equal than the other needs to be addressed as well. And on that, I just want to quickly highlight, for many years now, we've had an agenda of empowering the girl child and looking at equality. Okay? But I struggle to understand how we can empower the girl child, take her to school, learn all these things, tell her that she is this important person, and then once all that has gone on, we then take her to Rora and say, this guy pays money for you. What does that actually mean? What does that do to the esteem and the confidence of this girl? So it's all those things we need to look at. They're not in isolation, they're all together. So when we're empowering the girl child, we also need to then look to say, after all this, do we then want a guy to pay Rora for our child? will she continue to have the independence that she's worked all so hard for? Because if I've paid pro rata for you, I'm then going to want to expect certain things from you. But if we start to have these discussions more openly and more candidly, we're then able to say, you know what, again, I'm back to the independent situation. We, two independent individuals here, we can speak our minds without you saying, you can't talk to me like that. All those things, we need to bring them into this conversation.
Oh, thank you very much on that note. Yeah. So many of the points have been raised. So at the end of the day, we are saying it's important that in whichever relationship that you are in, to try to strike a balance.
Absolutely.
Because we are saying in each, and for example, you are married, you don't communicate, so that raises a problem. And when you are failing to have kids, now you are now trying to say let's have kids, which means now there's exemption of romance, so there's exemption of emotions. So literally, the bond between you is now it's cut off.
Now it doesn't exist.
And the element of whosoever having a say in your relationship. At the end of the day, we find that the cases of suicide, depression, divorce, they are at a rise.
Anxiety.
And at a point whereby we are all locked down at home, it's critical that it's either you have a doctor that you can ring, or there's a psychologist or a therapist that you can try to talk to. But the thing is, run away from talking to someone who doesn't have who won't give you some kind of professional advice. Because if I can give you my advice as an individual, it won't suffice to helping you somehow evade mental health issues. You find you yourself by the corner, because I would have told you that ndakaenda kunoona sekuru ningi akandipa kuchu ndikaita twins. You try to go to that security, it doesn't work, then you'll be like blaming yourself. So overall, we are saying mental issues are real, and we should try by all means not to be a perpetrator, and if you feel like you're a victim of it, try to speak to someone. Eventually, basically, I think that's the keynote, saying, try to strike a balance. There's someone out there, it's not the end, there's still room for change. If you can't have children or you have challenges in your marriages, there's still a way out. Ending your life is not the answer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But most importantly, I think in striking a balance, we need an even playing field. Yeah. Being able to strike a balance between good and bad, we need an even playing field, because if in this skit we've seen the guy seems to be the one in power, making decisions. I don't want this anymore. And as the dependent woman, she's just sitting there saying, so what do I do? Because she doesn't have the power to say, you know what, I've actually reconsidered myself as well. I don't think this is working. But she doesn't have that power. She feels she's been married by this person and she should remain underneath him. So this is the balance that we need to have. If we're talking about equality, we need to have two independent people inputting into this relationship. If you have just one person, I don't think I would be happy to just sit down with my wife and telling her what to do at all times. That's not a marriage. I want her to question me, say, why are you doing that? How's that helping our family? So at the end of the day, we need to create an environment where we're able to have a two-way adult conversation where we discuss issues openly. I think there's way too much to say here, and perhaps we can continue on a different segment. But there is way too much that we need to unpack here and repack so that we can start to have these conversations more openly.
Thank you very much.
Catch your feelings now, let's go away now. Oh, say what it is now, wanna know now.
Well, the discussion was getting heated, you did receive one or the other. I do believe there's something that you can take home. Overall, we discussed the issue of we unpacked culture, we unpacked many issues that play a role in a marriage. So overall, what you need to do is talk to your partner, ensure that there's effective communication. If there's no romance, know that your marriage is heading downward the drain. So try to somehow, all those things that you were doing earlier when we were still boyfriend, girlfriend, try to do them again. Try to bring forth that vibe, romance vibe. Try to be in the marriage for the right reasons. When you say I do, well, you saying I do so that you can be manufacturing babies or what? But if it was for love, try to bring back the love. Try to not be the stress causer for your partner, but at all times try to be the one who maintains the smile and to keep that vibe of love in your marriage. When you feel like your marriage is going through a hard rock, try to talk to someone. Try to develop a culture whereby there is a therapist that you can ring, there's a psychologist, or even a doctor. Try to open up. Don't die alone. There's someone out there who wants to listen and who's willing to give advice that can change your life for the better. Let's fight mental health. Mental health, we can fight it only if we open up. Thank you. We'll meet in the next episode.